Good afternoon, and welcome once again to the Conversation with Al McFarlane. I am W.D. Foster Graham, the book review editor of Insight News, and I will be your host for this Book Chat Thursday. Conversation with Al McFarlane provides robust, stimulating, inspiring, and eye-opening conversation from all aspects of the African and African American diaspora. We have recently passed 1,100 subscribers to our channel, and we are shooting for 2,000 subscribers. So if you're watching our channel and you like our content, hey, do a share, and subscribe. Definitely share with your friends, your family, your colleagues. Today, we have two guests. Our first of all, it'll be our guest author, Rose McGee. She is president and founder of Sweet Potato Comfort Pie, a catalyst for caring and building community. She's a member of the Delta Sigma Theta Sorority, a recipient of the Black Collectives Fellowship, the Bush Fellowship, the University of Minnesota Liberal Arts Hub Center Residency, and the Facing Race Award. She is the author of the play Kumbayah The Juneteenth Story and the book Story Circle Stories. And most recently, Can't Nobody Make a Sweet Potato Pie Like Our Mama. Rose is also a Humanities Officer with the Minnesota Humanities Center, leading Story Circle work, Feeding Our Souls, and the Headscarf Story Circle Gathering. And she was named Citizen of the Year in Golden Valley, Minnesota, where she resides. And our second guest is someone that we have always had welcoming to our show, Brother Troy Johnson, who is president of the African American Literary Book Club, who will be providing input to our show for today as well. So it's my great honor and pleasure to welcome both Rose McGee and Troy Johnson.
Hello.
Hello, everyone.
Hi. Hey, we're glad, Troy, glad to see you back. Rose, glad to have you here with us today.
It's a pleasure being here. It's beautiful. Thank you.
Hey, so, and Troy, okay, tell us what's been going on since you last appeared with us.
Okay, since I last joined you all, I've actually joined an organization, the board of the Independent Book Publishers Association. And my role there will be to help really elevate Black stories, Black books. And so I'm hoping to leverage that opportunity to do more of what I've always done. And, I'm also involved with another group of people who are working right now we call it the Black Book Accelerator. And we're working to, basically sell more Black books. And we're looking at a variety of different ways of doing that. And one of the things that we've been doing, I've been doing this for about 9 months now, aggregating best-selling books. This is not a public, we haven't made this public yet, but what I'm doing is looking at sales data provided by Sakana. So this is just, it's purely transparent. No, it's very different than the New York Times bestsellers list, which is rather opaque. But this is completely transparent. We're taking point of sales data from thousands of different booksellers and compiling bestsellers lists of books written by Black people. And one of the things that we are finding, that I find by looking at this data, is that, for example, there are fewer Black books being published. Over the last few years, that number has gone down. And when I say published, I'm talking about books that I'm looking at sales data for books, selling more than 100 copies a month. That number has trailed down over years. When we look at bestsellers lists, like the New York Times bestsellers list, we don't see a lot of Black books. And so the problem is discoverability. How do you learn about new books? And that's another issue we're trying to address. So this bestsellers list, we hope, will help address that issue, because there are a lot of books that are selling really well, but people simply are unaware of them broadly. There are books that are we know that over the years, the number of platforms reviewing Black books, that's gone down. And much of our attention has gone towards social media, and social media is driven by engagement. So unless you're spending a boatload on ads, or you somehow fit what the algorithm is looking for, it's really difficult to gain exposure on social media. So we're looking at ways of helping books become more discoverable. And I'll just stop there.
Well, I appreciate it, Troy, because as an independent author myself, hey, thank you for all that you're doing. And as we support Black books and publications, because visibility is everything.
It truly is. Yeah.
So, Rose, tell us something about your history growing up.
Well, thank you. I'm just, excited about what I just heard from our brother Troy here, because I've been one of those authors who have been wanting, to get things published for years. And I think my hesitancy was just not knowing what to do. And I started writing when I was young, and certainly didn't have any clue as to what's the right format, what's this, all that. So I began young, writing little simple poems that rhyme, because that's all I ever heard, right? And by the time I got to high school, I wrote my first one woman show in a competition that we had for high school, and I won it. And that was inspirational, to feel that somebody was really feeling what it was that I was trying to convey. But by the time I got to college, I just wasn't focusing so much on that aspect of the arts. But later on, somewhere in life, I fell back into the poetry routine. And then I ended up self-publishing 2 poetry books, I believe, and eventually a third one. And then I ended up publishing more of a professional book, which was Story Circle Stories, which is used to help, with my work. But it was so exciting to finally get this book published. And I won't jump too far ahead in that, because you may want to come to that later. But just when I think about, I grew up in the rural South in Jackson, Tennessee. I went to Black schools, Black church, Black everything, right? My elementary school, high school, college, everything was Black. And so there was always this push to get an education. And what does that mean, to get an education? No one really pushed go into the arts. It was something that we did, and it was big, but we weren't necessarily encouraged to focus on that. So that's sort of where I came from. I was raised by my grandmother and my great grandmother, my father's, side of the family, and in Tennessee. And summer months, I'd come here and stay with him in Minnesota.
Well, hey, so many of us basically have those roots, and we were products of that, quote, great migration up north, seeing as a, quote, the land of milk and honey and opportunity. Of course, we found out that's somewhat different. Somewhat different. Like Rose from Titanic said, the experience of it was somewhat different.
Somewhat different.
So, Troy, I'd like to ask you, since Rose and many persons that I've had on the show have doing Black children's books. Now, I myself was a child of the 1950s, where you did not see Black children's books out there. But what can be done to further, give the children's books more exposure? I know I say that because a lot of times, especially with Black children, it's a major thing about seeing themselves in the books that they're reading.
Yeah, I think the most important thing is to support the platforms, whether they're indie bookstores or websites or publications, platforms like Inside News, for example. It's important to support those. I mean, it really, because these are the platforms that are going to give exposure to books like Rose's. And if we don't support them, that we're stunting or we're thwarting their efforts to support our books. So the more we support these platforms, the better they'll be able to do. And I'm emphasizing that because oftentimes a lot of our support goes to, I don't want to beat up on social media, but if we give all of our attention, all of our eyeballs, all of our clicks, and if we give social media platforms all of our attention, we're just going to get more of what really drives their revenue. And what drives their revenue isn't our children's books. And so again, we have to support the platform. So if you're lucky enough to live near a independent bookstore that sells books, or even if it's even if it's a Barnes and Noble, if they're selling our books, you need to go there and buy the books from those platforms. Sure, you can go on Amazon and sometimes get a better price and get the book the next day. But again, Amazon isn't driven. Their revenue model isn't one that supports us, where unlike an independent bookseller, their mission is to support our books. And if we don't support those platforms, we're just going to, be in a situation that we're in now, where our sales are down, the number of books that are being published is down. And indeed, if you look at the entire Black book ecosystem, all of the professionals involved with the production of a book, whether it's editors, writers, publishers, distributors, booksellers, agents, all of these people are impacted. So if we, again, the whole industry is impacted when our books are hard to find and we don't support the platforms that support those books. And that gives the industry the impression that there's no audience for those books. So, WD, I clearly remember the first book, children's book, that had a Black character in it. It wasn't written by a Black person, but it was it was called A Snowy Day. And I was a little kid, and, the book had been out only a few years. But when I saw it, I remember, I'm 62 years old now, and I remember like it was yesterday what it felt like to see that book.
Mm-hmm.
But today there are so many great children's books or covering a wide variety of subjects, far more than I would have ever imagined. And, even when I started my website, I could, I would be twiddling my thumbs waiting for the next book to come out. Now I can't keep up with all of them. But because I can't keep up with all of them doesn't mean that the average consumer is aware of those books. So if you're not, in, near an independent bookstore that's focused on these books, and your local Barnes and Noble isn't focused on these titles, and you're spending most of your online time with social media, you're probably not going to discover these great books that are out there. So again, as if there's not a lot of demand for these titles, simply because they're not discoverable, then it gives the industry the impression that there's no demand for these books, and so it starts this downward spiral. Well, there's no demand, so we publish less of them, and we publish less of them. We don't dedicate the resources to promote these books. There are fewer platforms willing to promote the books, and it just is. You reach a situation we're in now where there are just fewer books, and then they start looking at, well, let's publish celebrity books. They have a platform of their own, so a lot of the children's books, the popular ones, are written by celebrities, and they sell really well at the beginning, and they start to trail down. But again, on my website, for example, there's, if you just look at the best-selling children's books or the list of books that I publish of books coming out, there are a lot of great books coming out. And but again, if you don't come to AOBC to look at that, you wouldn't know about these books. And so I'll stop there. But yeah, we really have to support the platforms that are supporting the books. We have to support the authors, the events. I publish a list of well over 100 events that take place annually every year across the country. Many of them focused on Black Black books and Black writers. So we have to support and attend those events wherever possible, and share with your family, friends, and emails and all that other good stuff.
That is so true, Troy, because look at it. It begins with us. It's us to put out that energy to let people know, yes, our books are here, and the books are by us and for us. So speaking of local booksellers, and since you mentioned it, I definitely, for these booksellers here in the Twin Cities area, we have 2 independent Black-owned bookstores. First one is Black Garnet Books in Rondo Community in St. Paul, and Stride Bookstore in Minneapolis. So, say you want to know where the books are, definitely come to these bookstores here. As I say,
It's crucial.
it is so true. And so far as events coming up in terms of the Minnesota Black Authors Expo will come for 2024, will take place on Saturday, October 26th. The details to be announced. So Rose, now coming back, what inspired you to write this story? Because it tells about how it's building a stronger community.
So much of what Troy has mentioned is what inspired me. It really is, because even though I was one of those creative mind children, and yet it's like, what do I do with it? I was blessed enough to be able to have some expressive outlets in church. Church would let you read your poems, sing your songs, and where do you get your inspiration? And being at a Black school, we always had assemblies that featured our folks who wanted to do creative things. So that history is just something that I've always wanted to figure out. How do I bring that into now, so that not only does it keep the story alive and we don't lose it, but it also gives our young people something to hang on to. And here I am, not even really realizing it, but a few years ago, the sweet potato pie was calling me, and I didn't even know that it was. And I still don't even like cooking, for that matter, because I told you I grew up with my grandmother and great grandmother. They did the cooking. I did other chores, mind you. I had plenty of chores to do, but I didn't have to cook. They did. And I appreciated that. So at some point, when this whole thing around the pie captured my heart, I wanted to write about it. And this was before I started Sweet Potato Comfort Pie and that whole mission behind it. I used to make the pie, people enjoyed it, and I was selling the pie in different farmers markets. But what struck my attention when I first started was when I heard this young man tell his wife, because she had tasted the sample that I had out at the farmer's market. She said, "Oh, honey, you gotta come over and try this." And he said, "What is it?" And she said, "Sweet potato pie." He said, I don't even know about a sweet potato pie, but my mama's. And it was like this revelation hit me. I understand that. And she didn't. And see, that's the thing. We cannot lump all Black people in the same category of where we come from, with what we think we know and don't know. And for her, it was like, "I don't understand what's wrong with you. This is really good." And he says, I can't. And he walked right on by. Didn't even look. He just kept going. And I had a couple of incidents like that. And next thing I knew, I started thinking about it, and like, yeah, there's something very sacred about this dessert. So I referred to it as the sacred dessert of Black culture. And the next thing I knew, I was writing about it, but I was writing it as the history of sweet potato pie. And that was years ago. And I actually submitted it to a publisher, Brother Troy. And the publisher just she said, we got to do something way different with this. And I just didn't have the energy to way different with it. I didn't know what to do. So I just tucked it aside. I don't even know where the manuscript is. And this was before, you had access to everything to put it everywhere just like that.
Mm-hmm.
I got to dig through my house one day and look for that thing. And then it would be years later that I thought about writing it after I heard, this gentleman and some others talk about, I don't want to eat nobody's sweet potato pie with my mama. Let me see if I can't write that down some sort of way. Not so much about the history of the pie now. Instead, now I want to focus on just this. So I wrote it as a children's chapter book, and I submitted it to the Historical Society Press. I don't know why I submitted it to them. And I didn't even try to submit it anywhere else. And that's the thing too. You should feel comfortable pushing your stuff out in more directions, but I didn't, and they didn't accept it and said, we're not publishing children chapter books. We are publishing children's illustrated book. Well, I knew what that meant. That meant very few words that had to be powerful and on point.
Mm-hmm.
And like, I don't have time for that. So I just put it aside for years. That was in 2014. And then after that is when the whole idea of what happened with my feeling compelled to take pies down to Ferguson after young Michael Brown had been killed. Then I came back and then I started making pies and just giving them away, and then so forth. So I'm in a meeting one day and I'm listening to people talk, and there's this gentleman who's a white man who I like him dearly, and his book had been published by the Historical Society Press, and they were getting ready to have this big thing for him. And I congratulated him. I said, well, at least they wanted to publish your work. They didn't want mine. And he said, well, they want yours. So we talked about that a little bit, and there was someone in listening distance and said, well, why don't you reapply? I'm like, And this person went on and on about, you should reapply. So it's okay, maybe I will one day. Well, it probably took another month or so. I actually did reapply. Same editor, same response, but this time she said, I remember when you submitted this before, and it's the same thing. We're not publishing children's chapter books, and I don't know if you're interested in taking a shot at trying to make it a children's book. Now, that was the difference right there. She asked me if I would be interested in taking, and by her asking me, it prompted me to, oh, okay, maybe I can do that. And after 5 edits, I get this letter back saying, congratulations, we have unanimously chosen your book. And that was in 2018, I believe, or 2019. So I say that to say it's amazing what can happen when the person on the other end gives you some element of encouragement of what it is that you might be able to do in order to fit the criteria for what they're looking for, because they see the potential in it. Whereas if you just get a straight up reject, some people, and I am that way. I will try again, but some things I just, and so that's kind of what had happened. So I was very excited when this finally happened, but it took a while.
Oh, I acknowledge you for that. See, one of my my own quotes is called it "Believe in dreams and never give up."
Mm-hmm.
That was especially when it comes to being an independent author.
Yes.
So one of your quotes is this. So I want to ask both you and Troy. It said, "If there is no struggle, there is no progress," by Frederick Douglass. And so I'm asking to you, how does that quote speak to you? Troy, I'll let you go. Oh, you need to unmute.
Sorry about that. Yeah, that quote definitely speaks to me because what I do is I run a website, celebrating Black culture through books. And I've been doing this almost 28 years. And it has been a struggle since I started. I mean, I can't name the number of struggles I've gone through. I mean, it's just, currently, for example, I'm struggling with upgrading the website, really getting to the point where I can scale up, just really tremendously increase the number of books on the site and the number of authors. Now I have, 7,000 authors, almost 7,000 authors and their books on the website. But I would ultimately like to make that a comprehensive list, which is pretty aggressive. Because I want it to be a resource for people when they're doing research on books. So when I talk about the number of Black books being published has gone down, and I would go out on a limb and say that it's been continually decreasing for the last decade, right? And I have data from a number of sources, including my own website, to support that. But I think it's important that we also report on our industry, and I like the site to become that ultimately. But yeah, it's, so whether it's not fighting, but whether it's struggling against an environment where Amazon is now, selling more books than everyone else combined, whether it's, operating an environment with social media. For many people, the entire World Wide Web is social media. The number of visitors to websites has gone down over the years as social media sucked all the air out of the room. But what that does is it creates a web in which it's a lot less rich. There are websites when I started that I aspire to become like. In other words, so ALBC is literally the largest website dedicated to Black books. That's not a good thing. I mean, I should be operating in an environment where I say, oh, here's this great website about Black romance books, or here's this great website about urban fiction, or here's a great website about science fiction, and they should be all thriving and rich, but we no longer have an environment like that. And so what we do have is an environment where there's just not a lot of websites that are engaging in deep, comprehensive coverage of books. And if one starts up, they struggle. I mean, it's really difficult for a website to build a business, attract eyeballs. I've been doing it, like I said, 28 years, so that's an advantage. But we also operate in an environment where Google controls traffic. Google can kill websites overnight. And indeed, one of the struggles I had was about 15 years ago, Google cut my traffic by 70% overnight. And it took 5 years to recover from that. But in the aftermath of that, Google killed websites that never recovered. I mean, some terrific websites. And indeed, all of the NMPA, National Newspaper Association websites were affected by this. And again, it's a tough environment. So I wouldn't be doing this unless I was willing to struggle. And you're not going to be willing to struggle unless you're mission driven. And so my mission is to, provide a platform that gives some other little kid, a sense of excitement when they see a book that speaks to them, or an adult that reads a story about, that resonates with them. So no one in the book business, is doing it just to make money. They're mission driven, and they have to be willing to struggle. So
that's so true. Rose?
Very true. I admire you because you did it. There was a time in my life when I thought, I want to publish. I want to be a publisher, and I want to publish Black books. And that yearning kind of went away because I got tangled up in other struggles, right? And when we recognize that, but it still comes back to what is our purpose, and what is the mission that drives us? So I actually wrote a play that I'm hoping that can one day make it to another level. It's made some nice levels in the past 3 years, but it's Kumbayah The Juneteenth Story. And I knew it was important to bring this story forth in a way 28 years ago, I was in a position where I was asked to write something educational about Juneteenth, because at that time, only people only knew, was that Juneteenth meant a festival in the park, a parade and eating barbecue and drinking red soda water, right? So what do we do now to bring the education component to it? So it's been that long ago that I wrote that. And just within the last 3 years, it's gotten a pretty decent, it's starting to get some good visibility. But that's one of the quotes that's in the play, because the character Frederick Douglass serves as the narrator. And that's a statement that he makes. There's several quotes that character makes. But when I think of that one, we're seeing it every day. We see it in every industry. I went through it when I was trying to sell sweet potato pies. I can't tell you what a struggle it was to try and get the pie into a major chain, into some supermarket kind of environment. And it was just not what people wanted to buy, was their market analysis. And excuse me. So as a result of that, it never got into the grocery stores. And then I know I could see it myself, because no matter where I went, you didn't see sweet potato pie on the shelf very often. And if you did, is it really good? And one of the reasons for that is, it's just like the title is, can't nobody make sweet potato pie like our mama. And that's how people feel. So they don't want to buy a pie like that, right? And then the other thing is, if you're trying to put a sweet potato pie out there and you're putting preservatives in it, that's just taking it to a whole nother nasty level. So folk who are into, and I'm not knocking, knocking Patty's pie, because I believe that Patty LaBelle probably makes the best sweet potato pie at home. But when it got into that whole market thing, I look at it and I don't want to eat it. And I finally did break down and I got to see what it's like. And it's like, it's horrible. And that's because of the preservatives. But for someone who that doesn't bother them, that's fine. And that's where we have to understand how to be okay with what doesn't necessarily work for us, right? So I may have my attitude about it, but I applaud Patty for probably the money that she made from this partnership, I suppose. I don't know. But I also know that it's nice to see a Black person get another step into a major network. So that's great. So it doesn't mean that I have to like it. It just means that you go along with it, you applaud people, you appreciate it. If we could do that in every industry, and if it doesn't mean that just because I come along and I don't care for it, now I'm going to take it off the shelf. It doesn't mean that, all right, it's a Black book, so we're not going to have people, so there's no point in promoting it. Because one thing I've come to realize, if the proper marketing is put into anything, darn near anything can sell. And the proper marketing cost dollars. And yet we have the power to make that happen, but we don't do it the way that we could and should. And when I say we, I'm now talking about Black people. Because when I look at how fast something can be sold or purchased that typically has nothing to do with education, we're on it. We're on it. The nail industry, it's just where, the hair industry, we don't even make the hair. Black people make fake hair. I don't know, but I know that we buy it all over the country, African people everywhere. So if we could begin to be a little more conscientious about things that are really going towards the good of educating us and not knock us down so badly and so poorly, I think it could be better. So that's kind of where I am with the industry, and how the industry isn't set up to be successful for the works that we do. And we do have to be creative, as Brother Troy is, and create our own industry and create that industry in a way that we can get our folks to know it and see it. And also, when mainstream media picks up on something, pick up on it with the right marketing behind you. I mean, it's great to see. Okay, yeah, we're gonna promote this merchant's stuff in February, and let's just honor Black History Month by putting it in there. Well, that's well and good. Are you marketing it in a way that it can go beyond February? Are you? And then I don't want to come back at the end of February and there it is laying over there for 10 cents because it didn't get any kind of hype when it should have been. It didn't get front cover. I've gone into bookstores, big name bookstores, right? And you're thinking, all right, if the author is coming in today, why isn't the book right in the window or on the front? Why is it that I got to go in here and say, where am I supposed to be? And nobody knows, nobody has there are no books sitting around. If you're promoting your guest today, seems like you put it out front and center. So it's just a whole thing about the marketing and the approach that folks still do with our work.
Yeah, this that is so true. It's hey, it's up to us to be to be creative and find those ways, because we put the energy out there. Okay, what I think oftentimes this saying that what we think about and feel about, we bring about. So with our energy can produce it. We've already have it. It's been in us all along. It's just for us how to use it or how we apply it. So now that brings me to the question for the two of you. Who were or are your mentors? Say as you grew up, who were the people that were telling you, yes, you can? There are no limits. You got this.
I guess I'll go first. But before I answer that question, I wanted to point out that Rose's recipe for sweet potato pie is actually on the website and is worth checking out. What makes it,
in the book.
And the book is up. The book is, if you click Rose's name, you'll be able to work back to the book.
Yes.
But what's the point that she made about preservatives and other chemicals that are put into the food to increase its shelf life, and that does impact the food that we eat in ways that I'm not sure that we're fully aware of. So it's best to get the fresh sweet potatoes and ingredients and make it at home as well. That's really important that we do that. That's why nobody's sweet potato pie tastes as good as your mama's. You can't eat everyone's chitlins. You can't eat a lot of stuff that you find in people's homes. But anyway, so I would definitely try check out that recipe. In terms of role models, I think it's coming up. My parents, my mother was a great champion for me, but I grew up in an environment where it was an all Black community, and the teachers were all Jewish women. Actually, I don't think I ever had a male, and I went to grad school twice. I don't think I had a male teacher in my life. I do remember I had one professor at Syracuse that taught African American history, but that was it. So throughout primary school, secondary school, just no influences. People were there, I guess, to get paid. They weren't influencing us in a way that I hear other children were influenced by teachers in their community. The teachers lived in their community. They were inspiring. I didn't enjoy that. As an adult, I have people that I rely on and talk to on a regular basis. They're not famous or anything, but they are people that I draw inspiration from. I know one brother, Paul Coates, who runs Black Classic Press and A Good Day to Print, has been an inspiration and a great motivator of mine. And we work together on a variety of levels. There's another brother named Ron Kavanaugh who started a website called Mosaic Books. He's a peer, but again, we hopefully have motivated each other over the years. And he ran a book website. That was one of those websites that I wanted mine to be like, in terms of the design aesthetic, in terms of the content, in terms of the reviews. But that website's no longer on the web. He actually started before me. And because when he folded his website, then I could say that ALBC.com is the oldest website on the web dedicated to Black books. But his was out there before mine, and he was doing a great job. But running websites is really difficult. Man, I lost track of the question. What was did I answer the question? Inspiration. Yeah.
Yes.
That's not there. So yeah, there are a variety of people that I work with in the industry who have been really inspirational. But I didn't really enjoy that until I was an adult, unfortunately, because I think it's important for young kids to have role models, people who inspire them, people who encourage them, help dust them off, when they fall. And, that's really important.
It is so true. Hey, how about you, Rose?
I have a host of them because of where I was raised and how I was raised, being in a small rural Black community. It was just very, very rich, and I didn't know it was at the time. Some of us, when we have high school reunion, we talk about people who we looked up to, and now we even talk about them even more. And one of them who comes to mind is a woman by the name of Mildred Manuel. And Mrs. Manuel is in her 90s now. She's health is not doing well, but she was, first of all, she was beautiful. Well, not only was she beautiful, but she taught us how to be beautiful in a way that meant, you don't walk out of the house with your clothes wrinkled. You might work in the fields every day, which we did, many of us, but it doesn't mean that when you get ready to go to school or you get ready to go someplace that your clothes have to be wrinkled. They may not be the prettiest things, but make sure you press them. And to this day, I cannot deal. I have to iron my T-shirt if I put on a T-shirt, which I rarely wear one. But, it irritates me when I see people wearing wrinkled clothes and they don't have to wear it, but it's not in the mindset. And also, and I know this is guys, I'm sitting here talking to you, but we wore, skirts then. I can remember when pants became all right to wear. But before that, we were wearing skirts, and because she taught business classes, and that was, we were all aspiring to become a secretary because that was so the thing, right? And so we had to look it if we were going to be it. And we wore skirts, and we were taught to always carry an extra pair of nylons with us, no matter where. And because you never know when you might have to change it, but never walk around with your legs looking like railroad track running up and down. And so that was, the mindset that we came from. And that has always stuck with me. And of course, from the caring and just loving automatically, that was my grandmother, my great grandmother. And yet I think about now. So when I look at my inspirations now, I have to show you this. I had to go retrieve this medallion here. This is my first book award for this book, and it came from Dr. Yes, thank you. And you notice I said first, right? So my first award from Dr. Artika Tyner. And I can remember telling her years ago, before, before she became the publisher that she is now. And I said to her, I admire you. I said, you are inspiring me. And it was just her energy and her intellect around Black culture and wanting to make sure that people understood its value and being in a position where she could make that happen. And that was very admirable. And then when I was blessed enough to finally get the Bush Fellowship after over a 20-year period of time after 7 attempts, and one time forgot to push send on time. So that's another word of inspiration for you both. Apply for the Bush Fellowship, but don't give up if you don't get it the first, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, eighth, ninth, 10 times. Just keep on going. But when I got it and was told that we could work with a coach, and it was up to us how we wanted to manage that, but we could have a coach. And I wanted to split mine into 2 coaches. And I chose one who I was so inspired because the activist in me has always been, but I chose Leslie Redmond. And I don't know if you know who she is or not, but at the time she was the youngest president of the NAACP in the history of Minneapolis. And she was president during a time of I think, let me get this right, when Jamar Clark, later on George Floyd, all of that period of time, right? And she's an attorney. She had worked on a double degree as well, but her tenacity and her courage really inspired me. Plus, she was smart. And I wanted to spend time with that a little more and to just gain a little more insight to how young people are thinking around activism. So I do. And so these young people, my own children, of course, Rosalind and Adam, they inspire me all the time because they just work my nerves. But them working my nerves kind of helps me to understand some other things differently as well. So being an elder, I just find it very important to take into consideration those who are younger and those who are older. Elders, I think of, certainly Elder Mahmoud Al-Qadi, who wrote the foreword to my book, The Play, Kumbayah The Juneteenth Story. I think of, Dr. Josie Johnson and certainly Elder Katie Sample and so many other wonderful people who have been supportive of me in this period of my life, as well as young people who I learn from as well.
Oh, that is so true. Because say we are the elders now.
Yes.
because one of my cousin Valerie Johnson Aiken once said she talked about how we grew up wondering, where are our elders? Where are our elders? Where are our elders? And they said, hey, wait a minute. We're the elders now. Our parents have, on my mother's side of the family, they've all gone on to glory. So yeah, when you were talking about the skirts and stuff like that, oh yes, you were talking about my mother. That was her. She was a fashionista. She grew up with that. You don't step out of that room if you're a woman. And all your seams had to be straight. There couldn't be no wrinkles, no threads. Had to be properly accessorized before you even stepped outside the door.
That's right.
Does that sound familiar, Troy?
You know what? No, I didn't come up that way.
Too young.
Oh, that's right. Okay.
I grew up on the tail end of that, so I did see, where the guys on the street, everybody was clean. The slacks, people wore slacks. They were pressed. The shoes were nice. People took a great deal of attention in how they looked, but also as a young person, I recall when sagging pants came into vogue. And, I was on an airplane the other day, and I remember when you went on an airplane, the men usually wore suits and the ladies wore dresses. And now, I see so many people in their pajamas with flip-flops. The ladies have on bonnets. It's just, it would be unimaginable to walk outside looking like that, let alone get on an aircraft where it's just, times have changed, and I appreciate casual Fridays, and I don't think we all need to wear 3-piece suits at the dinner table the way we used to see on TV, but at the same time, we just let we just let everything go. Anything goes. The police are all tatted up, and it just. So I think that affects how we move in the world, how we, so if it's okay for a man to walk outside with no shirt and his pants sagging and he's wearing flip-flops and with tattoos and earrings and, do-rag, if that's cool, then it speaks to our mentality in a way that I'm not sure we fully appreciate. When you paid attention to how you looked, how you presented yourself in public, I think that also that affects the way you behave, and it affects your standards. And I think that we've lowered standards in a lot of ways. I look at the writing of my aunts, people who didn't go to college. The penmanship, the way they write is so much better. And then I look at some recent college grads. They can't write without Grammarly or ChatGPT. It's really different. I think that a college education today is about equivalent to a high school degree, a high school diploma. 30 years ago, it's things have really changed, and so I don't want to. I'm getting on the soapbox now, but I think that the way you were raised, Rose, is important. That's something that we've lost as a culture. And I think that manifests in many ways, and not all of them are good. And we need to bring some of that back. And I'm not sure how that can be done. Our kids are being raised on social media and striving to look like people that don't exist in the real world, and lifestyles that people don't have. And it's just a lot of ways I think the world was better off prior to the web even. And believe me, I make my living off the web, but I'm not sure that the net benefit has been positive. I really have to think about it, but in many ways we were far better off before social media. It's not like we were brought closer together. We're motivated in ways that social media won't explain. We do know social media. There have been studies on this. They can and do manipulate your behavior. They can and do manipulate your emotions. They can and do know you better than you know yourself. And they use that to make money. And they don't care what the outcome is. They really don't care what the impact is on people, not just Black people, but the American culture. And that, how does that look? We have a president we've had a president, Donald Trump. That should not have been possible, but it was made possible in part by what's going on the web. And yeah, I think the clothing, the what we consume in terms of media, the music. I mean, the lyrics and music. We used to listen to Richard Pryor, but you didn't do it in front of your parents. You went in the basement, and now stuff that's far worse is at the top of the charts. And that all
yeah.
I know the top. At any rate, I'll leave it at that.
And on that note, I have to say this too about cooking and about recipes. So the book has the recipe in it, and it's interesting because I've been demoing this recipe for years. Years ago, I came to realize, you know what, I don't have to keep this as a secret. What's important to me is that people make a dessert that they enjoy, that I find to be a delightful dessert, and it's part of my culture, and I don't want it to die. And so I had this experience, and she wouldn't mind, my telling the story, but I went down to to Mill City to do a reading one day, and Mill City has this whole history around the history of milling and flour and all of that. But the woman in charge, she was so hilarious. She says, Rose, I know you just like to whip it up out of your mind and in your head, but I really had to measure things. I had to measure it precisely. It was so hilarious because she emphasized that to me as an apology as soon as we got there. Because what I had said was, all right, we're just gonna stand here and make this, and anybody who wants to do it at home, the recipe's in here. But you and I demoing this, we're just gonna put these potatoes in, and we're gonna pour this in and put this in, and I can't do it. I can't do it. So it's just interesting how cultures and training and where we are with where we are. Because when I called my grandmother all those years ago, my first marriage, I'm now living in Denver, Colorado, and I wanted to make a pie. I woke up one Sunday morning, decided I did, and I called my grandmother and said, Mom, can you give me a recipe on how to make this pie? And she said, what recipe? It's in my head. And it didn't transfer too well from her head to my head. It was horrible. And it took me a few times to finally get it down. So when I first started trying to publish the recipe, it really was difficult for me to do. And then when you are working with professionals, everything's got to be measured by ounces and grams, and so it's no wonder people don't want to cook. But at the same time, folks who do want to cook and take it seriously, they got that measuring thing down. So I tell people all the time, I'm not a chef, but I'm a cook, although I don't like to cook. So I want to give a chef their propers because they've gone to school and they've learned the whole culinary industry in a way that sets them in a whole status above. So yeah, that's one of those things. Because I had to take FHA too, which was Future Homemakers of America. And all I did was burn stuff. And Miss Sudie Ingram, God rest her soul, she would say, well, Burns, that was my maiden name, Burns, I think you're going to have to hire somebody to cook for you when you're
Love it.
I was going to say, do you like your ingredients to be room temperature before you mix them?
I do. Rather than cold.
Right.
The only thing, even with the eggs, I try to set them out a little bit, not too long, so that and with the butter, of course, you have to melt it. But then I like the butter not to be boiling hot and bubbling when it's being poured into the mixture, but to cool down, calm down.
Cook the eggs if you do that.
Well, I would love to continue this conversation. It has been wonderful, but they said we have a few minutes left, so I have two questions. First, where can our readers purchase Can't Nobody Make Sweet Potato Pie like our mama?
Like our mama. Well, I think Mr. Troy Johnson's website is going to be the perfect place to go to learn that. Places that I want to acknowledge are two that I heard earlier, and that was the Strive books, and also, what was the one in university?
Black Garnet Books.
Black Garnet, yes. Black Garnet Books was the book store that the Minnesota Historical Society Press used when we released the book, when we had the release party. And also, select Barnes & Noble bookstores have it. And I know that everyone knows that they can certainly order it on Amazon. And there's that place that they can do it. I just want to put out one little thing that when you go to, if you're ever in Portland, Oregon, and Brother Troy, you're probably aware of this, that is the location of the largest independent bookstore in the country, which is called Powell's Bookstore. And I have the opportunity to actually be there to do a reading one Saturday morning for children. And it's a fascinating place. It's a tourist attraction, actually. So that was one of the most exciting kinds of places to be, to do my book readings. Like, oh, but I think one of the most touching places was when I went to Strive with our beautiful sister Mary, Mary Torres. She actually had purchased books and gave a copy to all of the children who came in that day.
Wow.
that was
Mhm.
that was really a beautiful gesture. So every child that came, she was able to give them a copy. So I have to say that because our the passion for what we do often goes deeper than just the money, as you mentioned earlier.
So true. And now, I would just say final question. Give you about 30 seconds, and I ask this to my authors and to Troy as well. I have this for you. Oh, before I do that, shout out to Michelle Delicious Delights, who is a viewer of our channel. Hi, glad to see you on there. And then my question is this: what advice would you give to your 13-year-old self from where you are now?
Best, I got so many. One would be don't, you know, I always wanted to just get a job to make money, and chasing money is a waste of time. You should chase your passion. And in the ideal world, you can make money from your passion, and usually you can. And it took me all of my adult life to realize that. And so I'm far more happy. I mean, I'm not making as much money as I did when I was in corporate America, but I'm happier. And it makes life a lot easier when you're happy. And I know a lot of people who make a lot of money and miserable. So you don't want, that would be what I would tell my 13-year-old self. Figure out what really motivates you and what makes you happy, and do that, and you'll be happy, or you'll be on your way to being happy.
Thank you, thank you, thank you, Troy. Rose.
If you really believe in something that you want to do, start working on it. Don't get distracted. And I call it getting ready, because um, I didn't stop writing, even though I wasn't encouraged to make it a career. But I think, if you just keep on keeping on, you're getting yourself ready. And then when the time comes, all you got to do is step into it, because you're already there. You're already ready. And I do believe you can do anything you want to do and not be, don't ever be discouraged by some of these things that you see and hear. And that the other thing too is not to get upset over what other people think. Because when you're a child and you're young, it's so easy to get discouraged. And that's why we have so many young kids who are, um, you know, not doing well. They're depressed or even suicidal, because they're being influenced by what everybody else thinks. And if you can just believe in you and who you are, and find something positive to latch on to.
Thank you. Hey, this has been a wonderful conversation. I thank you once again, Sister Rose McGee and Brother Troy Johnson, for being part of this very eye-opening and informative and stimulating conversation for our Book Chat Thursday. So, hey, for all of you out there, support Brother Troy. Go to that website, aalbc.com. And Sister Rose McGee, as well as Strive Bookstore and Black Garnet Books. Again, this is W.D. Foster Graham for the Conversation with Al McFarlane. I'll see you on the next go round.
All right. Bye, everyone.
Bye bye. Thank you.